Hey there, Yuris here, and welcome to Community Life. Here we talk with the amazing humans from the community world about their life journeys and learn from each other. Today we have a conversation with Talia Basma, a community enthusiast, storyteller, contemporary author of diverse romances, poetess, activist, and blogger who hopes to inspire minorities of all backgrounds to use their stories and love of worlds to bring others together. So, hello, Talia.
Hello. It's so interesting hearing your own life like reflected back to you so nicely.
Okay, so from this moment, I'm done, and I'm I'm just listening. Okay, I'm kidding. Anyway, what is your favorite tale out of the tales of Pixie Hollow?
Oh, that's tricky. I I haven't reread all of them, so it's like mostly a blur, but I'm gonna go with the classic Tinkerbell. I mean, I think that's why I even read Pixie Hollows because I was so obsessed with Tinkerbell as a kid. So I'm biased. I know there was like another one I really liked, but I can't remember which one. So I'm just gonna like not say it. I'll just describe it wrong and stuff like that. But I love Tinkerbell. I love her like story. I love her like mix of because I think when I was younger, I don't know about what the general population thought, but I think like fairies and pixies are associated in general with like soft, like magical and kind. And I mean, there's that element, but I like the like feisty and like empowered and like pushes through like adversity elements. And it's funny because like when I reread it, I was just like, wow, it's still so like inspirational. I was like, ah, it's still so inspirational. So that was like a fun little trip down memory lane more recently when I was rereading the series.
What do you think is the main difference between when you were reading it as a kid and now?
It's been so long that I don't even really remember reading it as a kid, other than like knowing that I read it. Um, I think the main difference is I like have all this perspective to reapply this like story to. I think when I was younger, again, like I don't remember reading it. I don't remember reading the Tinkerbell story and being like, wow, I love like I don't even remember reading it and thinking like, wow, I love Tinkerbell. Like it's just been so long. But I think those that series got me into reading, and I think the reason it got me into reading is because of the whimsy and the fun and the like love and the cutesiness and all of the in between. And it like it stayed with me in like a emotional way, but not obviously in like a, oh yes, I remember this exact statistic or fact. And I think now it's like the whimsy is still there, but it's arguably more magical because it's still like maintained its application, even though like I'm gonna say been through things. That sounds like really dramatic. It's not that dramatic, but it's like even though like I've lived like a fuller life of like another, 15 plus years, it's like, oh, like, this is still fun to read. This is still magical and it's like still really inspirational. Because it's like I can still like connect with Tinkerbell all these years later. And I just think that's really nice. I think that's really magical. It's like you can see my theme here: magical, princessy, happy, pixie, fairy dust.
Who introduced you to this fairy tale world?
um, I'm pretty sure it was my mom. I think my mom was actually always just throwing like books at me, like, hey, read this, read that, read this, read that. And I was just like, no, not interested. No, not interested. And she'd usually get her recommendations based off of what my cousins were reading because they're a couple years older than me.
Mm.
And back then, like Harry Potter was like their thing and the craze. And I was like, no, thank you. I'm not into it. I actually like refused to read Harry Potter back then. Um, and so I think I don't know what I think I had watched like obviously Peter Pan, and
Mhm.
when the Pixie Hollow series came out and I found it, I was just like, okay, I'll read this. And my mom like obviously encouraged it because she's like, hey, it's getting her to read. Let's give her all the books she can read. So yeah, that's definitely what happened.
Why did you refuse to read Harry Potter?
I don't I vaguely remember reading the first page and thinking it was boring. That's like a really hot take, I'm sure. But I remember reading like the first page. Mind you, I was in fourth grade. I don't know what age group this book was meant to be read at, like the first novel, because I know the book kind of like gets progressively more advanced. But like
Mhm.
the first book, first page, I just was like not interested. And I like it left like that impression on me, like, no thanks. And so I didn't read it until another like until eighth grade or something like
Mhm.
that. So it took me like 4 school years to end up finding it again. I did eventually like it, but I'm still more of a Percy Jackson fan actually. So
It found really I can relate to that because I'm reading books with my kid right now, and he's in sixth grade, and every book we start reading, he can't, like I have to push him, but he has to because it's like in the program they will
it's
discuss it and
cool.
all this stuff, and like you have to read. No, I can't. You have to read. No, I can't. And like we pass like quarter of the book. Oh, it's interesting. Yeah, okay. So you have to,
Yeah.
start some with something, and then and on your website, it's written that in high school, I took up writing my own love stories and I haven't stopped since. So,
Hmm.
why love stories?
Okay, so I'm sure the leap from magic and fairy dust isn't too far removed from like, so the transition as a child, like I finished the Pixie Dust series. I think back then it was like, I don't remember how many books, but it wasn't like even the full series back then when I was reading it. Um, and I read what was out there at the time. And then I was like, I like reading now. And so in terms of like your son, like I always say, like, if you don't like reading, it's because you haven't found the books you like.
Hmm.
Which it's like it sounds like such a silly thing in a way because it's like, of course I've tried reading different books, but I'm like, there are millions of books. Like, you did not try reading every kind of book. Like, just because you tried reading one self-help book doesn't mean you tried reading like a different self-help book. And then the same goes with romance, any kind of fiction and nonfiction and all that stuff. So, um, obviously, like once I finished that, I needed more happy vibes. That's kind of what I was chasing. Um, and romance chases the happy vibes. It always ends with a happily ever after. Even if it is like a tearjerkery one, um, it's the main couple ends together and they're happy by the end of the book. Whether they stay happy after the book, I don't know. That's not my business. I just want the happiness in that moment. And I always tell people, I'm like, I'm one of my goals for 2024 actually is to read a couple more nonfiction books, but it's just like I just can't do it because I just want to live outside of the real world. I'm like, the real world is sad. Like I
Hmm.
just need joy for 20 minutes at a time. Uh, so I mean that was kind of the transition. It's like almost like I want to say it was seamless. I don't know if that would be the case. I don't really remember exactly like the moment in which I was like, I'm gonna leave the pixie dust and go to romance. Like I don't remember that moment per se, but that was the logic.
What was the idea behind also a little bit of kind of like make this balance in the world, like sad and nice things, or like
I don't I don't follow. Could you?
yeah, I'm trying to find like you are talking about like good and bad things, like bad things that
Hmm.
happen in the world, and you need some good things in your life. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
was it something that you also tried to, make your impact into balancing these things?
I mean, the classic is like just be like a good person. That's kind of what I try to do. Um, Obviously that isn't like easy. I think that's like a whole part of being human is like constantly trying to be good. But I think like for me, I'm like an oldest child too. So I, help my parents a lot. I try to help my family in whatever ways that might mean. And I just like participating with my friends. I'm not actually that like active outside of my like shell. I like to stay home, cozy. But it's like I like to be loyal in whatever ways means. So it's like if I'm friends with someone and they're having a rough day, if there's anything I can do, whether it's listening to them, whether it's giving them advice, whether it's making plans to go out with them, I like to do that. And I feel like that's putting good out there in the world. And then on a more larger scale, I like to just be loud about caring about other people. As you're familiar with since you did a deep dive on me. And so like I find it super important in like paying attention to causes and letting other people know about them, because I think the biggest issue is something will be happening on one edge of the world so you don't really know about it. um, and so people just kind of keep going as normal. And an actually very specific instance that I can share is today I'm fasting, um, because I had this idea in last year, end of last year, when Christmas was canceled in
Hmm.
Bethlehem. I was like, I'm gonna fast on Christmas in honor of like the Palestinians and everything that's happening. And then also simultaneously, people were talking about Congo and Sudan, and I was like, like they're not what is not more important than the other, but it is hard to care about multiple things at once because you usually have to put your full energy into something. So I've just kind of made it a thing now where I'm fasting as often as I can for like a cause, so to speak, or for a place. And I
Hmm.
listed all the places. I think I have like 10 places on my list that I know of that need this fast. And so that's like another contribution that I'm making. And I'm sure people will argue like, oh, does it actually matter? Does it not? And it's just like sometimes it might not matter in the big scale, but it makes you feel more inclined to keep helping. And I think that's always good.
And it's also maybe sound like butterfly effect. And
Yeah.
if it makes you feel good, then you talk to other people, then you share your story, then they start to think, then they start to do it. And that's exactly how it works, because it's just impossible to just go and make a difference in the world.
Yes.
So
You got to start somewhere, is always kind of like the logic. You got to start from point A and you'll find your way at point Z eventually. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not a year from now, but hopefully eventually.
yeah, I never know. As long as you have a goal, or at least as long as you are moving, because
Yes. Yes.
sometimes you don't even have a goal. You just go
Yeah.
and see like what happens during your journey. And
Yeah.
you've been talking a little bit about your mom. So let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your parents. Who are they?
My parents are awesome. I'm like first generation American, so they came to America when they were in college. That's like a little bit different timings for both of them. Um, my mom was actually visiting America when she like met my dad, and then they like ended up getting married and stuff. She was I actually don't know where she was originally going back to because my family is like international. So she was, in Lebanon, she was in Sierra Leone, and she was in London. So I'm not really sure where she was home base was at that point in time. But then my dad was like, "Wait, I love you. Let's get married." And so I thought, so there's also that love story. Like my parents' love story is also like a little inspiration for me. Um, Seeing what like it means to just love someone fully and wholeheartedly. So that's like who they are in my eyes, in my reflection. But I'm sure there's a lot more to them that I could talk about. But yeah, like my dad is an accountant, and then my mom, he's like a fancy accountant. I've simplified his job title. And my mom is like a fancy HR person. Um, and it's so funny because it's like I'll learn about their general like jobs when I'm asking about them and asking what they're up to. And it's always so interesting. I think like accounting is definitely not for me. I knew that at a young age. It's like too much numbers for me. But I love analytics. So sometimes it's like my dad will start talking about, even if it's not literal his accounting job, but because he's an accountant, he has like this perspective on things, whether it's like general life or work or whatever. His advice is always so interesting to me because I'm just like, wow, you're looking at it so like statistically almost. And then my mom comes from like an HR background, so hers is a lot more. I don't know what the like HR logistics are in the profession, but she'll look at things a lot more fluidly and just like, I don't know how to describe this movement, but so she it's really fun getting their very different perspectives about one thing and then finding when they like merge in perspectives, because it's like, oh well, she comes from such a different background of thought and he comes from such a different background of thought, but then often enough you'll ask a question and it's like they don't describe the answer the same, but the answer at its core is the same. So I always find that fun. That's my hobby, just asking my parents things and being like, what are they going to answer today? What's their logic?
And what is your logic?
I think it's a nice mix of both of them after 20 plus years of influence.
Okay, so what is, okay, you told a little bit that you like also statistics. So what do you like about it?
I like reliability of like numbers and just like logged information. So it doesn't need to be numbers specifically, but like back when I would like, even now, I currently, when people give feedback, it's not like, it's not always like, oh, I give this a scale of 1 out of 5, and then several people do it. And I'm like, oh, well, now I have a nice chart that tells me 10 people voted 5 and 20 people voted 1, which means we need to improve the product or something. It's not that straightforward. People are a little bit more complex. Products are a little bit more complex than that. And so it's always really fun kind of finding like that grain of what the itch is or what the like yay factor is. That's like the best way to describe them. So when I'm talking to like customers, even now, if they say something is like, oh, like I really love your product, but it doesn't have this. And it's like sometimes, I mean, I know we're taught the cliche, the customer's always right, but sometimes it's like, I don't know if that's true. Like sometimes. So I like to filter it out to like genuinely help our products be better, our like help our team make the product better. And if I tell them every single piece of feedback that we get that's like negative in any way, it's not always constructive. It's not actually helpful. Sometimes it's something that just cannot be fixed or cannot be done at that point in time, at least. So if I know that, I'm like, okay, let's filter it down some more. And I just kind of like that process of like, okay, several people have complimented this product part. So let me go tell the team like they love this. Let's keep like, doing what we're doing. And then obviously the inverse is true. Several people are kind of nitpicky about this. They're really like annoyed that they can't do this thing or they can't have access to X. So I'll be like, hey, I know we've talked about this product a bit and like this feature that we want to maybe add down the line. Do we want to push it up a bit? Because I've noticed a lot of people kind of saying like, I wish that it was here right now. So kind of like just analyzing data and taking what you can from it to like be proactive almost is kind of how I would think on it. I just find that really fun. And I find it, I think, like a goalpost almost, because it's like it's visible progress. But obviously I'm also pixie fairy dust, so like happy vibes along the way is always a win for me.
I don't know why, but when you are talking about Pixie Fairy Dust, I remember Gru from Minions and how he played this fairy, and
Yeah,
then he told like, I have a lot of stress, that's why I'm eating my house that I'm living in. It's like very much.
that's a good image.
Yeah, it was so fun. I just can't, take it out of my mind.
I
And
definitely still think of Pixie Hollow, but I like that upgrade of an idea.
it was so fun. Yeah, it definitely changed my mind, talking about fairies, and you are talking about like that you want to make good things in life and help people. And also, I feel like it's almost impossible to please everyone. So
That too.
how do you balance this thing, like trying to be good and also knowing that it's just impossible to be good for everyone?
I so professionally it's a bit different than personally. Personally, it's funny. I've been kind of typecasted almost as like I don't actually don't know how to phrase this, but I'll say the inverse. A lot of people consider themselves non-confrontational. Like if their friend is annoying them or giving them problems or they don't want to do something, they just like can't figure out a way to tell this person like no
Mm,
or no thank you or I don't want to. Like they just can't figure out how to do it. And I'm not going to pretend I'm like I've mastered saying no, but I think I do have a better ability to say it to most people than, or say it more than most people. Um, and I don't know how I even got there. Like I think I as a kid was kind of labeled like weird,
mm,
um, different. I mean, I was when I was in public school, I was like the only girl with like curly hair in my class. So this boy would like bully me for it. And then it was this constant like cycle of like, oh, like okay, I was being like bullied for being different. And then I like moved schools. I was still kind of being bullied for it. Um, and so I don't know, like it just took like a certain level, like threshold to finally just be like, I like my hair. I think I'm cool. I like my hobbies. Like they're my hobbies. I like doing them. Like I don't know why you care. I can't, it wasn't like one moment. I think it was obviously like a buildup of moments. Um and it like strengthened because even like my hair, it's under a scarf, but the journey with my hair took a lot longer than just like a couple of years in elementary school. Um and so I actually remember a conversation with like my mom once when after I was being bullied by that kid in public school. Like she was just like, you are super awesome. I'm obviously summarizing. And she was just like, you are awesome. Like your hair is gorgeous. Like you shouldn't let like the naysayers win or like have an effect on your mood, essentially. Which obviously is like there's different opinions on that stance on how much you should let someone affect you. But I just remember that conversation and her basically also teaching me like how to like give and take what you get. Like, so I like to be a good person, but she essentially was the reason that I learned like a really good level of sarcasm and like
mm,
defense mechanism, verbal defense mechanisms. And this is in like my personal life. I think I'm still like trying to cultivate that energy in my work life, the professional life, but obviously it's like a little bit more complex. It's a little scarier in a world where it's like you're fired. So it's like you do have a little bit more power in this dynamic than like a friend or a stranger who it's like, okay, like I don't need to care too deeply because at the end of the day, it's like my life is mine. And I think that does apply to work, but because of like the context of work, it's generally even harder to do that. So I've been working on that myself, in terms of like finding ways to politely say no if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't fit, and also just like finding my voice in general in a workplace and just like being sure that I'm not sacrificing my values to an extent. Obviously, like it's there's nuances to that, but um yeah, I think that answered the question.
doesn't sound easy for sure. It's like it's not easy, definitely, totally. And you know, I've never thought about this before you're told that you use sarcasm a little bit as of defense mechanism.
Yeah.
So do you think that in general sarcasm is kind of defense mechanism for people out there in the world?
I I think I think yes. I think like I think at the end of the day, everything that you do is like at its essence a survival like thing. Now, survival is a lot more like do or die phrasing, but I mean, I think there's this phrase like hurt people, right? Like that's kind of, I don't know when I was taught that, but you're like taught like, someone who's hurt is hurting people. So it's like even that bully probably had issues, but it's like it's not my job to help him figure that out. It's not my job to help everyone figure that out. It's like my own job to figure out why I do what I do. I don't know that everyone who's sarcastic has the same like logic as me, but it's like my family also has a lot of like we quip a lot in general, whether it's like sarcasm or just like jokes back and forth. So I know that I use those a lot in my interactions, and sometimes for the better, sometimes it's not great. Like sometimes I'll be genuinely like saying something and then people are like, "Are you being sarcastic?" And I'm like, "No, I was being genuine. I was being genuine." So it definitely there's definitely nuances to like whether or not something is a defense mechanism and just kind of like how you use it. I think I'm sarcastic now even when I'm not trying to like be defensive, I guess. So it's like when you do something a lot, it sometimes just becomes ingrained in your natural habits too. So
How does it feel to be the eldest child?
it feels like being the eldest child.
Okay.
No, it's I think like there's a lot of like TikTok and Instagram like memes and reels that I think do a relatively good job of capturing like the the jokingly true essence of being like the oldest like child or the middle sibling or the youngest sibling. Um Obviously they're played up a bit in some instances, I guess. Depends on the parents and also the child and how they perceive their experience, but my sister and I are 5 years apart, and then my brothers, they're twins. They are literally like 15 years younger than me.
Mhm.
So it's like already like that's like a very interesting experience. I When I was a lot younger, I was like 15-ish when they were born, and so my experience was very like this is gonna maybe sound bad, but 16 and pregnant. Like it was just like obviously I didn't give birth. I was like, let's get that out of the way. But it's like I obviously wanted to help as much as I could, which like that to a lot of an extent kind of lend itself to being like a mother figure rather than like a
Mhm.
sibling figure to my brothers. So it's funny because it's like my dynamic with my sister is very different just by the nature of like we were both children when we grew up, whereas my brothers are like so much younger than me that I'm just like, you're a baby. Like I can't just like I can't. But yeah. So I mean, I think I'm sure there are middle siblings and younger siblings that feel like duty bound, but I don't know. I don't know if every eldest sibling feels this way, but I feel like a very duty bound inclination in regards to like my parents, in regards to my siblings, in regards to like almost like everyone. I'm very like motherly. So that's how it feels on my end to be the eldest sibling.
How do you think your brothers think about you?
They love me if they don't lie. They say they love me. So, assuming they're not lying, they think I'm awesome.
Are there any situations when they go to you instead of going to mother?
My brothers are definitely like the newest generation of like sly and conniving almost. They go to whoever they think will say yes to their
Ah, okay.
request.
That's how it works.
So, yeah. So if they think mom will say yes, mom, can we do this? Can we have this? If they think I'll say yes, Talia, can we do this? Can we have this? And sometimes they even make it messier. Mom will have said no, and they'll ask me, or I'll have said no, and they go ask mom. And then me and mom talk, and we're like, what the heck, guys? Why are you trying to play us? Like, when one of us says no, we're both saying no. Like, don't try to trick the situation. So that's how it works on their end.
Yeah, they're always figuring things out. Yeah.
Pretty smart, but not cool.
What does it mean for you to be true to yourself?
Um, it's a mix of things. I think everyone has like labels that fit them, and sometimes they fit them so well that it like becomes almost a central part of their personality. So, and what I mean by that is like if someone asks you like tell me about yourself, it's like one of the few things that might come up. Um in like the conversation in the first, 10 minutes, depending on how open they are, I guess. But um, I think for me, it's a mix of, you know, family orientation, um, like my love of, all things romance and happy-go-lucky and sparkly vibes. Um, and then also just like my my faith and like my cultures, just kind of like combining all of those into one person and making sure that like it's at the forefront of my personality so that there's no question of who I am to someone else looking outside in.
Have you ever had like big disappointments in life?
Um, I want to say nothing that was big enough for me to feel inclined to like bring up now. Like, I think obviously in the moment they were probably bigger disappointments, but I think retrospectively, I don't think I've had like a huge disappointment. Obviously, there's like the basics, like when something is like doesn't go the way that you want it, or when you get like a job rejection, those always suck. Um, uh, but at the end of the day, I don't think anything too huge has happened, luckily. But there's time. I think I think world events and like people's reactions are like a pretty big disappointment that constantly occur, but I try not to let it like be something that I carry with me because then it's just like a huge weight of like pessimism almost. So I try to balance out my pessimism with like the optimism as much as I can so that I can keep going.
I saw this quote from Being, and it was like, and when I'm lonely with everyone around, I go to my happy place where I'm alone. So, where's your happy place?
No, that was just like metaphorical. I mean, happy place is reading romance books. Like I just if it's not reading, it's like writing one. It's like daydreaming essentially. Like I'll daydream a story up. I don't even need to be writing it. So sometimes I might have like a checked out look. And it's not that I'm like not interested in the people or in the experience, but it's just like I've I think like my battery has like run out essentially. Um and and so recharging is just kind of like finding that zen in my la la land of storytelling or in someone else's storytelling. Um but if it were to be a physical way right now, it's currently watching like K-dramas nonstop. That's been my happy place as of late.
What is the backstory of Being?
Being was really like just a learning experience that I'm super proud of, because I you mentioned it at like the beginning of the podcast. Like I've been writing since like a school assignment essentially, and I never stopped. And in seventh grade, we were given like these writing prompts, and I found Robert Frost's The Secret Sits, which is super short. It's like a two-line poem. And I don't know why it spoke to me beyond like anything else that I'd ever read up to that point. Something about how short it was, but how succinct it was. Like in school, you're taught like reach this limit or like reach this like minimum number of words or
Mhm.
pages. Like, but sometimes it's like you're making me write 600 words when I can tell it to you in 300. Like, why do we need the extra 300? Like, what is the artisanal logic in that? I guess is the best way to explain that. And so I was really obsessed with the way poetry can essentially send a message without putting a lot of like effort in like a length sense. So I just deep dived into writing poetry, like from seventh grade all the way through college. I did obviously drop it at some points in time where I would like just not do it for like a couple of months, weeks, whatever. Um, And it just became like a hobby. I would like have a poem in my head. I'd write it down on my phone. I'd have a poem in the middle of class. I'd write it during class. It's just like whenever I had like these thoughts, these like almost like quotable phrases, just like you just kind of like, oh, I want to capture this thought. And so I did that more and more. And whenever I was kind of like in a funk, I would try to like get rid of it by like purging my emotions, so to speak. So the poems that are in being were essentially these poems from like all those years, obviously the more recent ones, just because the younger ones are a little, they didn't make the cut. And so it was just kind of a compilation of all these poems that I felt like really captured a lot of my emotions, captured a lot of messages that I want the world to hear. And I was like, let me share it with the world. I think I had been submitting to a poetry contest a couple of times and it just like never worked out. And I was like, it's it's the modern age. I don't need them. So I just like self-published it. And it was really great to learn the self-publishing process just from like almost like a business and future writer standpoint. And so that was the story behind being. And the name actually became the name wasn't even like I didn't even come up with it almost. My cousins were reading it for me, like my collection. And I was like, I don't know what to name it. Like I'm going between this and that and that and this. And then I think my cousin said something like, oh, well, you're just being yourself. And I said, I don't even remember who said it. I just remember being popping out during that conversation. And then I was just like, that's the title. And
Hmm.
then several years later, Michelle Obama posted like her book Becoming. And I was like, did she read my poetry book and just think of that? No, but I know she didn't. But that's what I like to joke around and say.
You never know. You never know. So
Well, I would hope if she read it, she'd leave me a review. That would be my hope. We don't know though. We don't know.
exactly, exactly. And tell me about your contemporary romance novel called Love Not Required.
Yeah, I'm querying it right now, which just means I'm sending out its resume. I'm sending out the book's resume. That's like the best way I can explain it to people who don't know what querying means. Um, so I'm trying to like find an agent who wants to like work with it, and then hopefully a publishing company who wants to print it. But that process takes forever, and it's yeah, I got my first no this year, which was kind of fun because I knew it was going to be a no, which some people might say it's manifesting a no, and
Hmm.
negativity. But for me, I felt it was setting realistic expectations. And I was like, well, we got the first no out of the way. Let's keep going. And, eventually we'll get to a yes. Um, so I've been doing that. But the book itself is um, just a modern romance. It takes place in California, where I like grew up, and this woman is super career driven, and she really wants to finish this internship and get like an actual job at this company that she's like really a fan of. And then her family has to like move and they're like, you got to come with us. We're not leaving you here alone, miles and miles away from us. Um, and she was like, but what? And so she gets a marriage of convenience, which is like a trope that I'm obsessed with. And my book is a bit controversial. I think not to maybe some people, but in the Muslim world, I'll just add some context. There's like different sects and different belief systems and acceptances of actions. And I just wanted a fictional but semi-realistic version of a romance, the marriage of convenience, because obviously, like a lot of the marriages of convenience I read are not like from a Muslim perspective. So I just wanted to find a way to like apply that to a Muslim couple. And so I have them do something called a mut'a, which is not going to make any sense to anyone who isn't Muslim. But the the point is that like the mut'a itself is a very controversial thing to do. Period. So it will be very interesting to see how this novel is received because it's like it's funny because it's like on one side it means nothing to some people. That word means nothing. On the other side, it means like, oh my God, how dare you? So that will be fun. But they get temporary marriage, a marriage of convenience, and then they, live together, they fall in love, and it's really cute. And the guy is awesome. I mean, he was written by me, so he's
Exactly.
he's
You know,
great.
and it also sounds to me like a little bit of rebel.
Uh, yeah, I think it is a little bit of my like stubbornness popping out because I know how some people might read this. And I mean, I'm gonna add like an author's note that I wouldn't personally do a mata, and I don't necessarily think they're necessary in today's day and age. But I feel like I just want more representation of like Muslims, and it might be an unrealistic storyline, but at the same time, like most of the romance novels I read are. So why shouldn't that apply for like Muslim romances? Like, why does it have to be 100% perfect or realistic? So, yeah, my mom was laughing at me that no that I saw coming. I like it was because of the mata. And my mom's like, oh, like you don't want to change that? Like, it seems like you're taking a very hard stance on this. And I was like, yeah, like I'm a grown adult now. I don't need to like pretend to be someone I'm not. I don't need to conform. If you have constructive criticism, I'm always open to hear that. But I think when it's like a main plot point or it's something that I'm really passionate about, I don't I don't need to change it. So I'm not going to. And then worst case, I circle back and figure out how to self-publish again. If no one wants it, I will find a way for it to make its way into the masses.
And to get a little bit of context, what is
Yes.
muta?
Mut'a is it's just a temporary marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Like sanctioned within our religion. Now I say sanctioned in quotation marks because again, whether or not it's actually allowed is disagreed upon. Um like colloquially, like it's not really allowed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't know what to like parallel it with, but let me think for a second. It's kind of like how people like will talk about if like divorce is okay, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
that's like the best thing I could come up with on the spot.
Okay.
It's like it's not the best analogy, it's not the best one-to-one analogy, but kind of like the cultural like dissent around like oh my God, someone got a divorce type of thing. It's like that same energy could be applied to be like, oh my God, someone's getting a mutaha.
Mm.
But the action is not the exact same as a divorce. It's temporarily getting married. Like it's getting married with the expectation of the like marriage like ending at an X date. Um, I'm not a religious leader. I honestly don't even know fully what it is to an extent. I just know that much. And I'm like, it works for my story, so I'm using it. Like, I mean, that's what a lot of writers do. Like, it's like you know it works for the story. Um, and you know as much context as you can know, but I'm not like an expert in the whole context of the whole religion. So the ups and downs I cannot elaborate further.
It's interesting for me. It sounds like if you have like a usual marriage, you like a full-time job, and if you have a muta, you like a contract job or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, kind of. Yeah. But I think the acceptance of it is a lot sketchier than if you told someone you have a contract job.
What is your writing routine?
Ah, it's a work in progress right now. It used to be really good, and then after this book finished, I like got a full-time job, which obviously takes like precedence in a couple of ways, and I'm still trying to figure out how to balance like hobbies, my writing, and like my family and friend time accordingly. I think like weekdays always feel like a bust after your workday. Like you're just like, I just want to relax and unwind. But I have this Muslim romance writing community that I'm hoping to like um lean into more this year as like a support system that I mean I created it as like a support system to begin with, but it's kind of lean into it more this year um to help even myself a little selfishly get better at holding myself accountable because it's really easy to say you're gonna write and then the day goes and you're like I did not write a single word. um And right now, because I'm kind of like, I don't want to call it a crossroads, but because I'm kind of like trying to balance querying, I'm I'm like hesitant almost. I don't know why to start my second book, but I feel like after maybe, February, I'll probably be like, you know what? I'm actually tired of querying and maybe I'll focus on book two. So I don't really have a routine. When my book is published, maybe by then I'll have a routine because hopefully I'll have a fan base actually reading my books and anticipating my release dates. Um, but right now it's just kind of as I please almost with luckily my partner cheering me on, and all my loved ones cheering me on as well. So yeah, no perfect routine right now, but just trying.
How did you feel when realized that in your childhood stories, all characters were Annabelles and Josh and White?
It was like interesting. It was almost like I took like AP Psych in high school, and so I think I'm like a psychologist. Um, I just found it super interesting to read, and it's just really true that like you are what you surround yourself by. Um, Obviously, like when I first started reading romances, a lot of the main characters were cis white leads. And I don't like know, like I was like, let's put it in perspective. I was like in sixth grade. So it's like I didn't even really know what I was thinking when I was thinking that. Like when I was ingesting that, I don't think I even realized like how I was regurgitating that back out onto the page until I read Sabaa Tahir's like writing. And I was just like, wait a minute, I can make my characters like as ethnic, as Muslim, as like me as I want. Um, and it's interesting because I think in the book community, there is this constant back and forth with a lot of readers about basically giving lower reviews to minority authors, BIPOC authors, because they couldn't connect with the character. And I find that so interesting because I was always able to connect to the like white characters, and it wasn't like a positive or negative connotation. It was like, oh, this girl loves to read. I love to read. I didn't really process that her name was, Annabelle or, whatever, or that she came from like an American like Christian, I guess, background. Like I wasn't really processing that. I was just like giving it like a completely different persona to this person, uh, until like after reading such a like ethnic and diverse voiced book, which is why I'm like, well, I'm going to make my books as diverse as possible because it's like I can. The world is my oyster. The novel is mine to write. And so I just find it like a almost like a psychological like lesson in a sense, like a it's just like very interesting to look at as like a reflection of society and how the general population is assumed to be, white and, Christian and cis or whatever. And then everyone else is unrelatable by nature of not being those things. In reference to like the reviews where they like kind of ding a star, like, oh, I couldn't relate
Yeah.
to this like black character, I couldn't relate to this Muslim character, even though I read books where they're literally at church, or I've watched movies where they're, doing things that I've never done and I'd never do, but there's aspects of them that I still relate to. So yeah, I don't know. Like I don't even think I had like, it wasn't even like an epiphany. It was just like I read Sabatier's books and I was like, wait, I like Ember in the Ashes like really opened my eyes. And so that's why I'm like a huge fan of her work because it just really opened my eyes to like just how much I can share myself in my novels and in my work as opposed to just like trying to still assimilate even when I don't need to.
How did you feel when unexpectedly met Sabata here on the virtual call?
That was really fun. That was really great. It was such a like pretty moment because I was just like happy that it was happening to begin with. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna meet someone famous, low key, from like a different acting, like I was gonna meet an actress. She was gonna interview us. And I was like, that's so cool. Like I'm meeting an actress. I don't live in Hollywood. That's new to me. And so that was fun. And then she like came on and I feel like I didn't look as excited as the other person that was surprised with me. And I always feel kind of bad about that. I'm like, I don't look surprised, but I was like dumbfounded surprised. Like I couldn't even be that verbal because I was just like, that's that's her in front of me right now talking to me. So yeah, like dumbfounded was like the best way to describe that. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like my one of my favorite authors in the entire world, like in front of me right now.
Did you ask all questions you wanted?
Um, I feel like I did. I think like authors are fun because it's like they're, I don't want to say like above the rest of us peasants or something, but like if there was a tier of people, it's like, you know, regular day-to-day humans, and then like authors are like a smidge above that, and then obviously actors and actresses are like way above that in terms of like perception, not actual like worth or value. Um, because it's like I still like I follow them online, right? And so it's like you see them posting, it's like they're just writing. It's not like it's like they're not doing anything crazy. Um, but it was fun to kind of get more background on her journey. I think authors in my experience are just very inspiring because it's like a lot of them obviously had to get rejected several times, or it took them years to kind of craft what they did. So it's just motivating because I think you don't want to compare yourself to other people's timelines
Mhm.
because comparison is the thief of joy and all that. But at the same time, it's like when their story is like worse than yours is the best way to like these words, the words I'm saying are not great for me right now. They sound so negative. They're so mean. But
Uh,
when you know that it took someone 10 years to write a book, it's like I can take as long as I need. Like it took me a year to write my book, but now it's just taking me forever to like edit it and like get it published and kind of like all these other things. And it's like it's just a good reminder that like every author's journey is different. So that's what I meant by like inspirational almost. And then like obviously like you already know like my activist background, and her story with Ember in the Ashes series was inspired by her life as a journalist
mhm.
writing, you know, news reports about these wars and everything, these tragedies. So it was just like a really inspiring and positive and like influential moment on me because it just reinforced that first reaction I had to her novels, that it's like I can be authentically me with my experience, with my insights and perspective on the world without feeling like I'm doing it wrong.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that like it's good to know that somebody had like worse, but I totally can relate to that, because I really like talking to people. I really like doing these community life conversations and other podcasts, and I'm like, then I see this Andrew Huberman, Lex Friedman, this Hot Ones show, and different other podcasters, and like, oh my God, they're so amazing. Like, how do they do this? And then I jump back and see like, oh, okay, they started 20 years ago. Okay, I understand. So it wasn't overnight. Yeah, it makes me feel better. Yeah. So I totally understand. Yeah, what you mean
It's
by that.
like the cliche Rome wasn't built in a day is so hard to like remember in the moment, especially when you're actually trying to finish something or reach a goal and then everyone else around you seems to have successfully reached it. So it's always good to hear different stories.
In your poem, Happy Father's Day, you wrote to the men who read parenting books, to the fathers who didn't. And it made me smile because I still feel a little bit guilty of that I didn't read those books. And sometimes I think that if I read them, I might have been a better father. So, what this part means to you?
I think I think in my mom read a lot of parenting books. Even when I was older, she was reading like teen parenting books. And she kind of was like, they're not helpful. She was just like, I feel like they're not giving me any solid information that I need. Because I think she was like looking for a very specific answer to a question and it just wasn't being answered. So from her perspective, it wasn't working. And then my dad is like not a reader. Like he is the antithesis of reading. So I just kind of thought of my dad in that moment. Like my dad obviously loves and cares for us. He does whatever he can to support us. Um, he'll like send me magazine like articles, like when I was in college, he'd send me like magazine articles about jobs that I was interested in, like people's perspectives on their jobs. So he'd do things like that. And he never read like a parenting book, but it's like he still cared, he still loved. So that's kind of like just the perspective I went into it with it. Like the parents who put that effort via reading like a book, and then the parents who put in that effort, but maybe they just don't read the book. Maybe it's just not their vibe. So
It reminded me of somebody told that some of their parents was book smart and another was street smart. So it's kind of like in that way. And
my partner was asking me which one would I label as street smart and book smart recently. He just coincidentally, he was like, "Oh, which parent would you?" And I was like, "I don't know," because my dad is book smart in the sense that like when he was in school, he would like do really well, which is kind of what the book smart refers to. But then my mom is also like street smart, even though she loves reading books. Like I was just like, this is hard. I was like, it's kind of tricky. Sometimes people are just like a really good mix of both, which is kind of what I want to be. I feel like I'm more book smart than street smart. So I want to be like a really good mix of both.
It's interesting. My kid recently told me, "You're reading so many books, but you are not getting smarter."
Nothing like kids to really.
And I was like, "Yeah, thank you."
Kids are really great at keeping you humble. I will tell you, that's for sure.
And it was like in a moment when we were fighting about something, and I was like, and he was like, "Yeah, not getting smarter." So
He's like, "You're pissing me off. Go read a book."
what are your top 3 boycotted brands and companies?
Top 3 boycotted brands. That's tricky. Wait, I actually have like a list of boycotts that I put on a website because I was like, it's hard to remember all of these lists. Give me 1 second. I want to give you like it's like a legit list that I put a lot of effort into it actually, because I was like, a lot of people in the comments were getting disheartened by so many things to boycott. And so I was like, let's just like make a list of things that you can buy. And obviously, like, I don't know about most people, but I online shop a lot. So I don't need it to be like a big brand. If you ship to me, I can buy from you. Obviously, in store is a different matter because these smaller businesses don't necessarily always have a storefront. And maybe you might need it immediately. So the immediacy factor plays a role. But I made like this whole notion of just like places to boycott, which means you can buy from them because they're actively supporting Palestine and other minority groups. And one I will say that I use actively, they're not Palestinian owned though, is Do, which is like a makeup skincare routine. And I'm only bringing it up because lately people have been complimenting my skin again. And I'm like, okay, clearly I should use this more often because I don't regularly do my skincare in that sense, like the whole like 7 routine thing. But I really like her product and she's really great at kind of like being an outsider still supporting. So that's kind of one that I really love. And then for Palestinian owned, there is like a shop near me that's Palestinian owned that sells like food. So that I go to them, but that's not like very helpful for people that are around the world. So that's not one that I would like document. But there is like a Palestinian owned bookstore called like Crescent Moon Bookstore. So there's like a lot of places I could list on and on and on. And there was one that actually called Flower Me Good. They're also skincare, but she's Lebanese and she knows about my BICOT list. And when I told her about it to kind of like help share the news, she's like, let me send you like a care package because like we got to support each other in this. And I thought that was really sweet. And I also thought that her website has like a sliding scale to consider like other people's affordability of her skincare. So if it's too expensive for you, she has like a promo code for 30% off regardless. Like it's not like a limited time 30% off. And it's just kind of like the what do you call it? The trusting of customers to use it properly. There's like There's a
Yeah.
word, there's a phrase that I cannot seem to remember right now, but just kind of trusting the customers to use it honestly. So if you can afford to pay, the full price, then like pay it. But if you can't, you can use the 30. And I just thought that like that kind of, I was like, we need more businesses like this. Like this is what we need to be supporting. So those are who I'll support for right now.
And what is the hardest part in boycotting big brands?
Convenience. Also recommendations. And what I mean by that is like I'll say like, oh, I love your like shirt, or I love this like toy that you have, or wherever you got this, like where'd you get this from? And they'll tell me like Amazon or wherever. And I'm like, oh, so you're telling me I can't have it because I'm not gonna buy it from there. So that's always tricky, which is kind of another reason why I made this boycott list, because I'm like, it's so hard to actively look for somewhere you can buy from when you want to buy something. So like
Mhm.
if I wanted a skincare like tomorrow and I needed it like within the week, eh, I'm not going to add in that extra like hour of effort to like Google pro-Palestinian brands. Like, I mean, I should, but a lot of people like don't have the time, they don't have that resource. And it's also really difficult. Like, it's not easy. It's not like Google just like spits out like, hey, like here are these pro-Palestinian brands you should support. Like they're obviously being like supported, they're funded by all these big brands. So it's like a circle where you really have to dig. So I made this so that like whenever I did need something, I wouldn't need to like freak out that I don't have a website or a source to go to. Like I try to categorize them. I can
Mhm.
share the link with you too as well, so
Yeah,
that you
please.
can do whatever you need to with it. But essentially, like I was like, okay, if I need clothes, if I need accessories, if I want a kitchen thing, if I want, shoes, like these companies are in the clear. And it's not a perfect list. Obviously, there's things that are missing. There's things that could be added. Um, but I just think, again, I think we've said this before. You got to start somewhere. So um, that's that's always this is a good place to start, in my opinion.
How do you feel about making lists?
I love lists. I don't know if you can tell.
Exactly.
In case you didn't notice, I love lists.
What is your process of creating and maintaining the list? A list, any list.
um, Well, this list in particular, because it's like obviously like we'll call it side project, it was like first just finding brands um, that met the criteria. And obviously that's like kind of hard to verify to an extent. Like uh, there is like pros and cons of like just assuming a company is supporting the cause because they said like one post or one statement, because sometimes it's
Mhm.
like a cop out statement. Um, So I honestly like had to do some digging on every company that I compiled, because at one point Instagram had a circulation of people recommending these places.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I was like, okay, I'll trust these. But as I was like doing it, I was like, but what about this is pro-Palestinian? Like I would look up, because part of the list included their website and kind of like their shipping details. Because a lot of people in the comments, it's like if they're not in America, they're like, does it ship to here? So I wanted to also accommodate for that. So it was like shipping details. And it's like obviously in trying to like look up these things, I was like, well, there's nothing here to signal
Mm.
to me that they care. So I started kind of digging deeper. I would look at Instagram accounts, I would look at their page, I would look at their background. So I even have like a tag that's like if they're Palestinian owned as opposed to like pro-Palestinian, because I feel like that does matter in an extent. And then I was like, you know what? Let's expand this to just be for all BIPOC. So I have like, I have like women owned and just like black owned. And so I was just like, let's just like label this as best as we can to
Yeah.
support as we need. Because I remember there was a list circulating around the George Floyd time as well. But I feel that those were just like articles that were just written for SEO, and I can't find them anymore. When I look it up, when I try to find like black owned companies, like obviously Google gives you lists, but sometimes it's a bit of a feedback loop. It's only giving you like the top 5 brands that have been kind of regurgitated several times. And it's like, okay, well, I'm happy to support these brands, but like, I'm sure there's other brands, right? So This has become like a master list. Again, because it takes a lot of time and effort. My first job was just listing a bunch of places, and now I've filled out all those details for them. And now I'm like, okay, back to like filling it out, just like names of businesses that I can add to this list. And then I'll circle back and fill out the other information. But in general, lists are just like a brain dump and then organizing the brain dump. That's how I do it.
Yeah, it's always easier to find something valuable. Just go to this list. You can go there, and then you see
Yeah.
everything in one place. I
Hmm.
I I can totally relate to that. So, and on December 2019, you wrote your 5-year plan, and it looks like 2024 is the last year of it. So, how is it going so far?
Horribly inaccurate. It's completely wrong. It's so off. I actually forgot that it's still posted. I actually forgot that I posted that. It's a bit of an accountability buddy, but it's wrong. In some ways great, in some ways bad. I actually remember looking at it maybe a year ago, so I haven't looked at it recently because I think the last time I looked at it, I was like, I think I need to draft a new one. This is like completely inaccurate. Um, I think back then when I wrote it, there was a lot of big question marks about my life that I just like couldn't properly goalpost, but I knew I wanted them to exist. So I was like,
Mhm.
I'll just write them into the plan per my cousin's recommendation. I have a lot of cousins. They all have good advice. And so like I had plans to like find someone and like get married. I think it was like next year, I think was the goal or something like that. I'm already married ish. It's a little bit, it's whatever. But let's try again. I've already found my partner and I'm already with them. And so it's like I found them ahead of time. Am I mad about that? No. So that's like a good thing. There are some writing goals I haven't reached, but I think I'm still like pretty proud of myself considering all the other life events that have like kind of taken up my time. So pros and cons, but yeah, that list is like a little outdated. I should probably go circle back and share an updated one.
What is your main take after creating this 5-year plan?
Um, it's quite similar to something I'm actually relearning almost right now, which is I don't know if you've heard of the 12-week year.
I saw this book on your list of reading, but I didn't hear about that. I didn't
Yeah.
hear about that.
It's I only just found it this year. Everyone was talking about it in their yearly planning. So I was like, I need to look this up. But it's basically when companies have quarter goals, you're basically applying that logic to your life.
Mm,
Um, and so instead of waiting till like, oh, I want to lose, I mean, like a cliche goal is like, I want to lose 10 pounds at the end of, 2024. Um, rather than making it like an unrealistic, almost like intangible goal, you
mhm.
want to make it more tangible, more closer to like a visible date so that it's actually in the forefront of your mind. So, for example, one of my goals, instead of like a lose weight or something, it was, walk 5K every day for all of January. And then it'll be a different fitness goal for February and then a different
Mhm.
fitness goal for March. But then by the end of the quarter, I'll have kind of maybe the results of the goal in which it's like maybe I've like lost a pound or something like that. And so it's just kind of like that instead of just these like loose intangible goals. The 5-year plan, even though it is also even more further out and it is almost kind of like an intangible thing, I think is helpful because it helps you put into perspective what those long-term goals are. Because I, I back then it was a huge question mark for me, and obviously like when you're also dating, it's like hard to know if you're going to mesh well with someone for several factors.
Exactly.
And so you want to reduce the factor of like, are we headed in the same direction? So that was one of the things, but I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I want. So I just kind of like was like throwing things. I was like, okay, what are things that I know I want to do? And not necessarily actually within 5 years, but they're basically like my overarching big goals. And where do I see myself? I think I established a bit of like some of the career goals in some aspects, and then some of the life goals in some aspects, but a lot of everything in between kind of fell apart. So,
Sounds like curated serendipity.
yes, I like that. That's a good phrase. I created serendipity.
You know, Talia, I really wish to have the sky as a limit to our conversation, but time is a limit. So let's jump to the rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Tell us a story from life or leave the story you've read.
As in a book?
Maybe?
Oh, this is supposed to be rapid fire. This is the slowest I've been at answering. Um, I almost fell out of a window as a child. I don't remember it, but it's been told to me several times. So it's a very funny story to me in my head because we were in our apartment and the couch was pressed up against the window, but the window didn't have like the mesh that we're accustomed to, at least in America. And so I was leaning against it. I don't know if the mesh was removed temporarily or if it was just never there. I don't know why I leaned against the window that
Wow.
was open. And I was halfway out the window and my mom caught me by my ankles. And
Not that
I
fun
lived to
story, but
tell.
good story. You know,
I mean,
it's
it's kind
happy.
of fun because it's crazy, but it has a happy ending. Like I came without a scratch. Nothing happened. I gave my mom probably a mini like heart attack, but what's new? I'm sure you're familiar with those scares as a parent. Those happen with or without that kind of story.
Yeah, exactly. Moon or Saturn?
Moon.
What are your favorite color and song?
I like anything pastel. Song. I don't have like a favorite song right now, but I've been really into like lo-fi just in general.
If you were a superhero, what superpower would you have?
Teleportation. That's
Who
what
do
I
you
would
learn
want.
from in the community world? Name just one person.
Who did I learn from or what did I learn?
Yeah, who? Who do you learn from?
Who? Rosie. I
Got
really
it.
like her posts.
Name two people who I should definitely reach out to and have this conversation with.
Ooh, two people. Um, I don't know their full names. Is that okay?
Sure.
There's there's David and there's Sophia.
I feel like it's Sofia Rodriguez.
No.
Ah, you know, okay, I will ask you about that later. Is there one question that I definitely should have asked you but didn't?
Hmm. I don't think so.
I feel like I have more questions after we get to know a little more your story of publishing a book.
Yeah, maybe.
And yeah, you know, I still didn't ask all the questions I had because as I told, you know, time is a limit.
I don't think there's any questions that you should ask. There's only questions you want to ask. That's why I said what I said.
So okay, let's go to this one question that you want me to ask.
What I want you to ask? Hmm. That's that's so tricky.
It's
These
not that
rapid fire questions are
it
harder
it,
than your regular questions.
it doesn't make it easy. Yeah, you know, it's just I'm just, you know, telling this
Um,
thing so people are like getting like, okay, it's rapid fire question, it will be easy, and then no.
it's never easy. The rapid questions are the hardest because of the pressure. I guess you could have asked me why I love both community and writing.
So, why do you love both community and writing?
I feel like they are both vehicles that connect with people, and they're like a really great way of um, sharing different perspectives, not just like from your own point of view, but also the feedback that you get from sharing your perspective. And that is my answer, my rapid fire answer.
Have you ever thought about writing the book with the community?
I have. I've wanted to make the interactive storytelling before. I'm just I've been struggling with how to platform it or how to set it up. But it'd basically be the like choose your experience story. So pick what
Hmm.
happens next, A, B, or C.
Okay, okay. I'll be waiting. Yeah, and I can't wait to read your book when it will be published, no matter how, by author or self-published. Like anyway, please let me know because I saw a little bit a little piece of it when it was a dialogue, and I was like, yeah, sounds great. So I'd like to read more. So
I'll
please.
let you know when it's ready. I promise.
Thank you very much. And the moment I met you at Between Two Watercolors, I thought like, I really want to know more about Talia.
Thank
And
you.
the moment I was preparing to this conversation, I was like, oh wow, I really want to know more about Talia.
I'm
And the moment
flattered.
we had this conversation, I was like, yes, it's so interesting to get finally to know more about Talia. And yeah, you're very fun and kind and nice person, and I
Thank
really
you.
love talking to you. And you told so many times about this fairiness and all the thing, and I I can feel that. I don't know how, but it's just the way you talk, the way you act, the way you smile, the way you share your thoughts. It's in you, and yeah, it's
Thank
totally
you.
that. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for this conversation. And yeah,
Thank you for
I
having me. Thank you for the excellent questions.
and see you in the community world.